אנחנו לייב, כן. איפה אתה רוצה?
בסדר. חשוב חיבור לל"ג בעומר, אני אזכיר את זה. לא בהכרח, אז המטרה היא גוש עציון. עם משקפי שם? Hi, welcome to Gush Eztion and to the area that has so much of our Jewish history. My name is Tomer Chazan and I'd like to show you around. We're standing here on a very historical place called the Road of the Patriarchs, or Derech HaAvot. This is a very important road that connected biblical towns such as Jerusalem, Bethlehem, and Hebron. They were able to track from satellites and retrace where people used to walk for thousands of years. And when they looked at this mountain range, what is known as Derech HaHar, the way of the mountain, they were able to retrace this historical path. We're standing at a very interesting intersection. And if you look just at this mountain here, this mountain is the last section that hides the vision or the first sight of Jerusalem. Now we know that Jerusalem is our beloved capital, but history actually begins 1,000 years earlier in a town called Hebron. Hebron is just to the south of us, about half an hour's drive. And it's very important to understand most people used to walk towards Jerusalem on the Road of the Patriarchs. This road was later on paved by the Romans, and the Romans confirmed that this route going through the mountain and not down by the valley was the preferred way of travel in biblical times. Gush Etzion offers an incredible vastness of history. On the eve of the independence, on the eve of the declaration of the State of Israel, Gush Etzion had its final battle in a kibbutz not far from here, Kfar Etzion, where over 300 men and women fell in battle, trying to hold on to this beloved area of the hills of Judea. Gush Etzion's passion, its commitment to fighting this battle has been proven throughout time. And going from biblical time, the time of Abraham, where he takes his son, Isaac, and he tells him, let's get up early and get onto the donkey and walk to the place that God said he will show you. This historical moment starts in Beersheba, not far from here, and they travel along the mountain road. They travel along this road over here, the Road of the Patriarchs, as you can see. This is where they start moving closer to the place that God will show them. At that point, Isaac asks his father, Dad, I see the wood and I see the oil, but where is the sacrifice? And Abraham answers him very awkwardly, God will show us the sacrifice. Something very important in that event. We can see that they are walking towards Mount Moriah. That is the early connected, these hills, to Jerusalem. It would be that. It would be the binding of Isaac. At one point, the Torah teaches us that he tells his boys, his helpers, to sit down, and he and the boy will go from that point towards that location. The boys could possibly have been told to sit down here because just beyond this mountain is Neve Daniel, is the highest point where we can actually see the Temple Mount and Mount Moriah, and from there it says that they saw the place from afar. So scholars and researchers really focus on this area over here. The proof of this connection to the Jewish heritage is also reflected during our festival of Hanukkah. Hanukkah, we know, falls at the same time of Christmas, overlapping with the end of the year, but a very important battle takes place right here, just behind me, during that period of Hanukkah. As we mentioned, the way of the mountain is a preferred route, but for armies, especially Greek and Roman armies, they prefer to travel on the open field. To walk along an open field with your phalanx, your troops, presented in full force that is the preferred way of an empire such as the Greeks or the Roman Empire. The Maccabees understood this and forced them to take the mountain path over here. The Greek armies of Antiochus Epiphanes III made their way to bypass the Maccabees' defenses in coming out of Jerusalem towards the west and preferred to attack them from the south. We see that the Maccabees did not wait, but rather they came out here to the hills of Judea to meet them. And the battle is described as the Battle of Bet Zechariah. If we look down at this valley, we can almost imagine these elephants traveling at full force, but falling into single file, single rank, that forces them to be at a disadvantage. The Maccabees knew this. They come out and ambush this army from the hills above. At one point in the battle, Elazar, one of the sons of Matityahu and the brother of Judah the Maccabee, he notices an extremely decorated elephant. The Greeks in those days used the war elephants, the equivalent of tanks in modern warfare. And this decorated elephant had a basket full of gold, and whoever was traveling on that elephant was obviously a decorated and respected general. Elazar thinks perhaps this is the king. This is Antiochus Epiphanes, and he decides to tear through the phalanx or the infantry that was protecting that elephant, and whatever it took, he would do to get that elephant and attack the king. Cutting the snake off by its head would have ended the war, and that is the determination and self-sacrifice that Elazar the Maccabee shows right here in this valley. He's able to get through the infantry, get under the belly of the beast, and stab it with his spear. Ultimately, the elephant collapses on top of him, and Elazar is the first of the Maccabee brothers to fall in battle. The battle, however, was won. The general was not Antiochus. There were battles that followed that, but this was a very important turning point in defending Jerusalem from the south. So as we can see, this place is soaked with Jewish history and very dramatic turning points in our beloved heritage. Today being Lag BaOmer, we have another town just beyond the horizon here called Beitar. Beitar played an incredible role in the Bar Kokhba rebellion, a rebellion that lasted from the year 132 to 136 AD, led by Shimon Bar Kokhba and his spiritual leader, Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva was the rabbi and the teacher of the Rashbi. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, we know that Lag BaOmer is his Hilulah. It's the day that he passed away. The entire country of Israel usually assembles on Mount Meron to honor Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who hid in a cave for 12 years, hid by the Romans, but he was really inspired by Rabbi Akiva and by Shimon Bar Kokhba. The town just across the horizon was the town of Beitar. The Romans understood that was the capital of the rebellion, and ultimately, for 4 years, we know that Bar Kokhba rebellion was successful. Any army or any campaign that is able to mint coins, and there were several coins found right here in Gush Etzion, saying for the liberation of Jerusalem, year number 1, liberation of Jerusalem, year number 2, liberation of Jerusalem, year number 3, and even very rare coins that were discovered for year number 4 of the rebellion. Minting coins and scrolls that were found that divided up farmland and property are proof of that initial success of the Bar Kokhba rebellion, which we commemorate even today in its impact and in its defiance to the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire, like many other empires, forced us to leave our faith and not respect and not honor our religion and our tradition. And I'd like to point out a very incredible Roman feature that takes place right here at this point. If you look further down the road, you can clearly see the mark of the milestone. The Roman milestone was a marker that was extended from Damascus Gate in the old city of Jerusalem, showing the distance to the next city. This distance and this kind of paving was very strategic and very typical for the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire, which was a military empire, relied mainly on its army. They realized that if we pave roads throughout the empire, and the Romans ruled from Scotland throughout Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa. That was the Roman Empire, and they decided that if they paved their empire with roads and leave milestones as markers, it would make the travel of the army and the trade much more successful and much more efficient.
You know, Tomer, it reminds me like Waze. Exactly like Waze, the mile rocks, right? Did the same job.
Very much so. Waze is an Israeli invention, in case you didn't know. It's one of the success stories of Startup Nation. And in the military, we were using GPS already in the late 90s. It's an incredible accomplishment to have taken the Waze and taken GPS, which we take for granted today. Today we have signage, we have GPS coordinates, we know exactly how long it takes us to travel to a place we've never been to. But in the olden days, the Romans were the first to pioneer this, and they were really, by leaving milestones, that really showed the traveler how far he was from the next city and his destination. The relevance for this milestone for us is very important, because in contrast to the Roman Empire and their defiance, we know that they repaved the road of the patriarchs. But this incredible addition to the story also highlights something that's very personal to me and very personal to our story. Come with me over here. I'd like to show you what I'm talking about.
Where are you taking us, Tomer?
So you don't have to go too far. And already over here, we're already discovering one of the impacts and one of the more interesting turning points of our story here. I'm standing here in front of nothing less than a mikveh, or a ritual bath, Jewish ritual bath. How do I know this isn't a Roman spa? The Romans loved the good life, by the way. They had a 5-star accommodation wherever they went. They had a spa, they had a jacuzzi, they had a sauna. This was all very much part of Roman culture. So how do I know? We prove that the Romans paved this road and they left their milestones. How do I know that this isn't just another Roman spa? For one simple reason. The subdivision over here, this divider, is very much in sync with our Talmud and our Mishnah, the instructions, the halachic instructions that we have to this day, showing us that a mikveh had to have a certain amount of water, 40 se'ah was the minimum amount of water needed, but also the subdivision. I often asked on our tours, when you come here, and really today being here in the field, I know with the corona, everyone's stuck at home, but this is really such an incredible energy that I'd like to share with you. Being out here in the sun and in the green fields of Judea, and just feeling the coolness. There's really a lot of cool air coming out of this mikveh, cooling me down as I stand here before you. That is the excitement. That's what I'd like to share with you. And I often ask on our tours, we ask, what do you think the subdivision is for? Many give the answer that it's men and women, an entrance for men and an entrance for women. I'd like to demonstrate very briefly how that would not work necessarily. I'm entering the mikveh over here. Right? You can really see inside what's going on. And you can even see some of the water that is still here from the recent rainfall. This is incredible. This is actually kosher mikveh. You can actually use it if it was deep enough. You can actually submerge and be absolutely fulfilling your right by going into the mikveh here. This is very exciting because the recent rainfall filled this up. You can also see that I'm coming out here on the opposite side. So this doesn't make sense, right? If it was men and women inside, there'd be a big party inside, and this is not really what we're talking about. So this subdividing wall is actually for the impure that are entering, and the pure. You come out in a pure state, and you exit the mikveh. This wall is to make sure that you do not touch, you do not come into contact, just like the 2-meter social distancing that we're all familiar with today. In those days, the idea of purity and impurity was very much respected and very much insisted before entering the temple. However, we are relatively far from the temple. So why would there be a ritual bath over here? As I mentioned, the road of the patriarchs continues towards Jerusalem. It bypasses Bethlehem. But in preparation of seeing the temple, This ritual bath was probably located here so that just beyond the next mountain, where you can for the first time witness and see Mount Moriah and the Temple Mount, this is where the Jews would have prepared and would have submerged in respect, just to having seen the place from afar, to having seen the Mount Moriah from this location over here. So this, guys, is very much a Jewish symbol and a Jewish landmark that you cannot deny comes from our heritage and comes from our sense of being here way before the establishment of the State of Israel.
How many years, Tomel, this place, this mikveh?
This mikveh dates back to the Second Temple period. It was probably in operation, if we think of the Jewish time period ending at 70 AD, but being very prosperous. From the time that Herod upgrades the temple, we're looking at pretty much 90-year period, roughly, of this being the center of Jewish life. Remember, 3 times a year, everyone drops what they're doing, you leave your jobs, and you take your family, and off you go, traveling on the road of the patriarchs to fulfill your obligation on the high holidays of Passover, Shavuot, and Sukkot, getting to Jerusalem. So this was a highway of Jewish heritage during that time. The mikveh is another one of those elements, another one of those components that makes Gush Etzion so embedded and so important to Jerusalem's history.
Tomer, you're telling us all about the history, the amazing history of Gush Etzion, the Patriot Road, and you started before telling us about the independence of the Israel government and nation. And as we all know, Gush Etzion had a very important place in this scene. So we would like to hear first of all about what happened 72 years ago and Gush Etzion today, what we have here today, which culture we have, how many people, how far are we from Jerusalem, and the people from all over can really understand what a special place, how important, how strategic is it for the government, for the country.
So I'm glad you asked me that. As someone who grew up here in Alon Shvut, this story of Gush Etzion is really the story of my life. This is my childhood memory lane.
As
right
the song,
here.
The story of my life. Yeah.
And the story of my life. The heritage is really what makes us get up every morning with a tremendous sense of achievement and accomplishment. And let me jump back. I'll take you very quickly to the drama that takes place over here on the eve of the independence of Israel. We know that the War of Independence of 1948 was the toughest war we ever had, even to date. It's tougher. We lost 6,000, right, soldiers, the most we ever lost in any war. And taking it one step of pre-state, Gush Etzion was given the impossible job, right? 4 kibbutzim, 4 farms that were out here were given the impossible job, not only to protect themselves, but they had to block the main highway of reinforcements coming in from Hebron and other Arab towns so that Jerusalem could be protected from the south. Once again, we see the defenders of Jerusalem. That is the name given to Gush Etzion, even in the modern warfare. And really, in all that drama, I'd like to mention that the yeshuv behind me is named after Elazar the Maccabee. We take the inspiration from his story, which I mentioned. But just after that is Neve Daniel. Neve Daniel is named after a convoy, one of the armored convoys that brought supplies and reinforcements to the kibbutz of Kfar Etzion. And I always like to mention the name Zerubbabel Horvitz. Zerubbabel Horvitz is a forgotten hero. We all know other heroes of Judah the Maccabee, but Zerubbabel Horvitz is really a modern Judah the Maccabee, which I'd like to mention in his honor of his sacrifice. This armored convoy is given a very important mission to reach Kfar Etzion, offload food, medical supplies, ammunition that is so essential for the Gush Etzion survival and struggle here. They were up against not just the local Arabs, but also against the Jordanian Legion that was very highly trained by the British. So they had a very tough fight ahead of them. A lot of them were survivors. Zerubbabel Horvitz's ultimate sacrifice is that he covers those who were wounded. He stays with them. Those who were not affected were told to retreat to an Arab house after they came under attack. During this convoy, on their way back to Jerusalem, they came under attack by overwhelming numbers. So Pavel Hovitz wired his armored car, and just like Elazar the Maccabee sacrificed his life for the protection of his men. This is a kind of energy and sacrifice that flows in these hills. And we grew up here emulating these people as not just heroes, but also what it takes to be here. Now, Gush Etzion today, being the supreme sacrifice. David Ben-Gurion even mentions it in his speech of independence. It was on the eve of Shabbat in the 14th of May, 1948, and he says, we owe the fact that we have Jerusalem, we owe that to the 4 Shabbos candles burning in the hills of Jerusalem, where the Gush Etzion had ultimately fallen to the Jordanians. It took 19 years really to return to Gush Etzion. The place I grew up in, Alon Shvut, means the oak tree of return, and we all see us as direct continuation. We continue the legacy of these people. Today, Gush Etzion has over 30,000 people living here, very motivated, very high quality of people, both farmers, high-tech, people who feel very strong about being here, a very strong Anglo community, people who've made Aliyah, who've come from abroad. So the mentality here is very easy for people like me who lived in South Africa, or my wife who's from Canada originally, to come and settle in Israel. Someone once said to us on the tour, I feel like I'm in the real Israel. That reality is very much felt here in the ambiance and in the air as we speak and as we tour the hills of Jerusalem. Every day we feel the success story of coming back here and settling biblical land, the land of the Maccabees, land that is so much part of our heritage, like the mikveh and the coins from the Bar Kokhba rebellion prove. And really, there's no better place to feel that you're fulfilling an incredible chapter in Jewish history, very long and impressive history that we're very proud of. This is really what inspires us on a daily basis.
As before we finish, Tomer, would love to hear about the winery and the blessing of Jacob to Yehuda, and about the cherries. Now we're coming up towards June. You know, we have plenty of cherries and festivals and tourism. And next time when they hear Gush Etzion or see Gush Etzion, they will be here without the COVID-19 and celebrating with us in the special places, heritage, attractions, hotels, and all we have to offer.
Well, thank you. I really like to encourage everyone, as we get rid of the prohibitions or the quarantine of COVID-19, I really encourage everyone to come out here before traveling overseas or even coming from within Israel. Gush Etzion, this is really the greenery. I don't know if you can see it in the camera, but it's really incredible how green, how fruitful, and how lustful. As the blessing of Jacob told to Judah, that really the wine, which is such a Jewish drink, you know, where every Jewish holiday, every high holiday we can imagine, or any festival is really honored by wine. And the wine here, this is really much wine country. The elevation of Gush Etzion allows the top wines to be made here. I know the Gush Etzion winery recently won once again a gold medal.
Again and again, Tomer.
We're serial winners here. And I'd like to encourage everyone to come here, plug into this winning energy in spite of the corona, in spite of history, in spite of so many efforts to defy us and to actually minimize us. We come out here with a quest for a better life and a quest to farm the land and really enjoy what Gush Etzion has to offer.
So as last question, Tomo, before we finish, please give us one recommendation when the next time we come to Gush Etzion. Which site, attraction, tourism, something we can't miss when we come here?
Well, as you mentioned, we have the winery, we have Deerland, we have the longest zip line here in Israel, we have ATVs, we have Jeep tours, we have an incredible underwater aqueduct that you can with distancing. It's natural distancing. You just walk one of the incredible lifelines of water to the temple during the time of Herod. It is safe. It's very much part of what we have to offer you, and I really do encourage everyone, come and join the fun.
Tomer, thank you very much. And whoever wants more information, you can go in the website Tourism, Gush Etzion Tourism. You should have all the information, and we're looking forward to see you here in Gush Etzion.
Thank you.
We will be back and...
And we will be back in 5.
Thanks, guys.
להפסיק. אני רוצה להפסיק עכשיו. לא להפסיק? למה? לא, אז אנשים לא ידעו כאילו...
זה בחיבור ישר בזום?
לא,
ביוטיוב.
תתחיל להפסיק, זה לא טוב, אז אנשים... כן, כן, תפסיק רגע. מה קורה, תומר?
בסדר.
חם, אחי?
בסדר.
אם השמש עליך, אז בוא...
לא, אני אגיד לך, באתי צמא כבר מראש. אז יש לי מים באוטו, אני רק אלך לתדלק זריז.
לא, אני אומר לך את זה... סבבה, לך לך.
סבבה, אבל אני שמתי לב להוראות שלך, בגלל שהבנתי שהשמש
זה טוב, אנחנו זורמים קצת, כן, את המצלמה.
כן, אני אסדר את זה קצת, קפצתי מנושא לנושא קצת, אבל...
תתחיל קודם כל רקע על גוש עציון היום. אנחנו בגוש עציון, 20 יישובים, 30,000 אנשים, יש פה תיירות, תרבות.
טוב, רציתי באמת לקבל את המידע הזה עדכני.
מידע הזה, יש פה חבל ארץ תיירותי והכל במרחק נגיעה, וזה כאילו קודם כל שאנשים יתחברו לפני שצוללים.
הקהל יעד שלנו זה מי?
תלמידים, סטודנטים מחו"ל.
בארץ. מחו"ל או בארץ?
מארצות הברית.
מארצות הברית.
זאת עד חטא, אז
לך שתי אחי.
אנחנו נדבר על יין.
לא, בסדר, לא משנה, אבל...
לא, זה מצחיק, כי עשיתי הקלטה לבית ספר יהודי בחו"ל, וגם הייתי צריך צנזר חלק מה...
נראה לי שאם מפסיקים אנחנו נותנים את הקישור. יגיעו עכשיו יותר. יש שנרשמו עוד ל... 20 ומשהו.
מה, לנו או לכולם? סך הכל?
לא, אליכם.
סך הכל בכל השלושה?
לא, בכל השלושה, בכל השעה וחצי, יש 6,500 אנשים.
ולמה? שאתה אומר לו, תגיד לו 2,000.
אם זה בתי ספר, אז אולי כדאי להדליק אותם על הישיבה, על כנפי נשרים,
סגור, אחי.
על ניצול שואה.
אני סומך עליך, אתה מעולה. אם יש עליך שמש, אתה רוצה מקום אחר, אתה רוצה לשבת, אחי.
קמתי עליכם קצת.
לא, אתה רוצה פתאום
בגלל זה האמת דילגתי למקווה, כי בניתי על הכוך שיוצא משם.
אחלה, אחי, אני איתך.
שמע, אבל ראית כמה זבובים יוצאים.
כן.
נראה לי אני לא אכנס בפעם השנייה והשלישית, אבל... זה כבר הלחם חמה שלנו, אתה רואה. לפעמים זה טוב להגיע חם ישר מהאוטו ולקרוץ, כי אחרת אתה...
אני למדתי הרבה. אני למדתי.
תודה. אבל בהחלט כאילו, להוריד את זה או שזה מוסיף ל...
כן, זה מה שאם זה כבד איך אתה תוריד אחי, אין בסוף.
זה די מגרם.
אתה בטוח אחי מה שאתה אומר? כי איך יודעים שיש חידוש אחי? כן?
זה הדרך, לא זום? עדיף יוטיוב?
לא ידענו כמה אנשים יהיו.
סתם, יש כמה הזדמנויות לשדר, אז...
לא, זום, הבעיה של זום זה שהוא מוגבל משתתפים.
וואלה.
כן, לא ידענו כמה יהיו, אז אמרנו
זה יוטיוב לייב זה נקרא? יוטיוב לייב.
אם יש לך יותר מ1,000 מנויים לעמוד, אז אתה יכול מהפלאפון.
למה יש יותר מ1,000?
שאלתי אותך,
בגוש הוא חייב להיות.
איזה? נראה לי בדקתי בעצמי, יש לכם איזה 17.
אז זה בעצם להטיס את הגוש קדימה, בתיירות אמריקאית.
כן, כל מפקק הגוש עציון היום.
המטרה להגן על יישובי הצפון, אתה יודע, צריך להגדיר מה אנחנו מנסים לעשות.
סדרה עכשיו שהייתה עכשיו.
ראיתם? עשיתי טעות.
חמה ללא שם.
עשיתי טעות, ראיתי את זה ב2 בבוקר, אני לא ישנתי.
כן?
הייתי שם בנסיגה, הייתי הכל.
לא הייתי שם אף פעם. כל ידע שהייתי בלבנון, רציתי את היד בראש הנקרא מהגבול. נראה לי קצת שטחי מדי.
אני אגיד לך שמי שעשה את הסדרה הוא גם כתב את הספר גלת.
מרוזנר?
דרך אגב, אפשר לעלות גם לפרגולה תוך כדי כאילו. אין לי בעיה לשבת שם בנחת.
אבל זה קצת.
פחות, אני פה זה המגרש
אחי, מה שטוב לך טוב לי אחי.
יאללה, מתחילים?
תומר, מה שטוב לך טוב לי, תגיד לי שאתה מוכן. תן לה.
שני מה שנקרא, אני רק אסדר את זה. זה בסדר שאני מפליג עד לאברהם וכל זה?
כן, כן, אחי, אתה השרביט שלך. סבבה?
מה שחשבתי, זה להראות להם מטבע מבר כוכבא.
יפה.
הם לא רואים את זה.
לא, אבל אני אתקרב אליך. יאללה. מתחילים?
לא, שנייה, אני אחביא אותו בחוק.
אני רואה שהוא עובר, נראה לי שהוא עובר.
עובר.
בכיף, אחי, תודה רבה.
יאללה, בכיף.
לחזור לבריכה אחרי שלא שחיתי שנים.
יאללה.
טוב.
Hello everyone. We are now here with Tomer Chazan, the best tour guide in Gush Etzion in Israel, and we're now going to learn about Gush Etzion.
Hello everyone. Welcome to my home court. You know, in sports we have playing away and playing at home. This is definitely my home court advantage. And as someone who grew up here in Lon Shvut, the Yeshuv just over the horizon, I would love to share the history of this area. Gush Etzion literally means the Etzion block, a block of about 20 different towns and villages that we have today. Over 30,000 people live here today, but this wasn't the case all the time. We had to go through quite a turbulent history over here in order to return to these numbers and return to the success story that Gush Etzion is today. I'd like to go back to the very beginning. You know, as a tour guide, we often meet different groups, and one of the groups we met here were Japanese atheists. They came all the way from Japan, first time here, and they really, you got to start from the Bible, from the very beginning. And I asked them, do you know who the first Japanese samurai was, or the first emperor? And there were several mumbles, but it wasn't clear, it wasn't absolutely obvious. And to us, it's actually very important. The first Jew was Abraham. End of story, right? No argument there. He's really the forefather, the patriarch of our nation. And everyone knows this. This is common knowledge. There aren't too many nations that can retrace their roots so quickly to the original patriarch. And speaking of patriarchs, we're standing right here on Patriarch's Road. This is a road that was tracked by satellite, that were able to analyze the terrain, the topography of the area that linked biblical cities such as Beersheba, Hebron, Bethlehem, and Jerusalem. And they saw that for thousands of years, people traveled along the mountain road, or Derech HaHar, the way of the mountain. We know that this is a place that, according to the legend and the story, the beginning of the binding of Isaac, the most important historical factor that takes place in Jerusalem and basically leaves the center significance for Jerusalem with us, is the story of the binding of Isaac. There's a very good chance that they traveled along these roads over here because this road was defined as the road of the patriarchs. Now, Abraham wakes up very early in the morning. When do we wake up early? When we're on vacation, when we don't have to do anything. Abraham was about to do one of the most difficult things known to man, and that is to offer his son as a sacrifice. And you can see that just by getting up early, it shows his level of faith. He's a giant of faith, and he takes his son and two boys, and they start making their way towards a place that God will show them. Just before you are able to see that place, and the Torah tells us, and they saw the place from afar, that would have taken place one mountain across from where we are now. There's a very good chance that at that point a dramatic turning point in their journey happens, and he tells both his boys, his helpers, he tells them, you should sit here and me and the boy will go ahead. So this perhaps is one of those markers in that story. We know that the binding of Isaac is the first of the historical events that take place in Jerusalem, and that links us directly between Jerusalem, our eternal beloved capital, to the time of Abraham, right here at this intersection on the road of the patriarchs. We know that Gush Etzion played a very important role during the story of Hanukkah. We all celebrate the story of Hanukkah, we light the 8 candles. But did you know that the 8 candles also represent 8 battles that take place between the Maccabees and the Greeks? And where after the 4th battle, Jerusalem is liberated. So it's literally the Shamash. So history plays out very much in the same shape as the Chanukiah that we all light every year. One of those battles is called the Battle of Beit Zechariah. And just across the road from where I am now is an Arab town called Khirbat Zakaria. Once again, a Hebrew name that was preserved very nicely by the local inhabitants who renamed it Chilpat Zachariah, the ruin of Beit Zachariah. Now, according to the books of Maccabee 1 and Maccabee 2, these books capture the story of Hanukkah way beyond the 8-day celebration, and I encourage everyone to go read those books or look it up, Google it, because the story is so much more interesting and so diverse. And one of the incredible stories, the battles that takes place over here, is the Battle of Elazar. One of the brothers, the son of Matityahu, who lead the rebellion, the brother of Judah the Maccabee that we're all familiar with, they come out here to Gush Etzion to block the Greek armies of Antiochus Epiphanes III, who are flanking Jerusalem. They're coming around this time to attack Jerusalem from the south. The first two attempts failed. They tried from the west, coming up the Bet Horon Modi'in area, but that failed. So ultimately, they flank and try to come this way. For most armies, they prefer to walk in open field, where you have your full strength, your power of many soldiers with armor standing in full formation of a phalanx. The Maccabees would not be able to compete with that phalanx, but over here, in the way of the mountain, they have to fall into single file, and that is an advantage the Maccabees took when they forced them to come around here. We can almost imagine these Greek elephants, war elephants that were given wine, by the way, to absolutely rampage through infantry and cause most damage, very similar to the modern tank today. These elephants would have made their way through the valley, and at that point the Maccabees spring the ambush. Elazar identifies a highly decorated elephant, which he assumes is the king himself, Antiochus Epiphanes, and his strategy is very simple: take out that elephant at all cost, right? Supreme sacrifice. Now, easier said than done, because each elephant had infantry around it. Elazar is able to penetrate that infantry, get under the belly of the beast, stab it, but what happens next is that the elephant collapses on top of him. He takes out that Greek general. It was not Antiochus Epiphanes. The war continued beyond that battle, but that particular battle was won by the Maccabees. And you can see once again, every year when we light the Hanukkah candles, we look over the hill to Bet Zachariah, and really we're inspired that we're not just celebrating our tradition, but we're living it. Speaking of living our tradition, we have another very interesting find over here, and that is along the road of the Patriarch, which later on the Romans paved. The Romans actually proved that this was the best way to travel by paving it. We know the Romans were experts in running an army throughout their empire. The empire stretched from Scotland throughout Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa. And for them, moving their troops around was of utmost importance. It was a primal need. What they did for us is that they used slaves and they paved roads leading from Jerusalem and other important cities all the way down to the south where the trade was. They also left us with a Roman milestone to show the distance from Jerusalem and leading up to the next major city. This, as you're all familiar with, the GPS app called Waze, which was also invented in Israel and very much part of our pride in Startup Nation. GPS allows us to travel very comfortably and very confidently psychologically in today's world. The Romans were the first to introduce that. What they also were able to do is expose that this intersection where we are now is very important in that travel. And 3 times a year, the entire population of Israel would drop everything they're doing here in the farmlands. Imagine you have a little farmhouse, your whole livelihood. Today we have Mercedes, we have Ferraris parked in our driveway. In those days, they were just happy to just farm and put bread on the table. And part of the blessing of this area is Ve'asafta degancha tiroshcha ve'itzarecha. You shall gather your grain, your vineyards, and your olives. These 3 elements in the olden days meant you're a king. You're an absolute king if you can eat that way on the table. And 3 times a year, you're supposed to take that first paycheck. That first time you get paid, take that and go and honor it to the temple. Give it as a donation to the temple. Because what are you saying by that? You're saying, I didn't earn this. God gave it to me, and I'm honoring God with my first paycheck. It's not such an easy thing to do today. In those days, 3 times a year, everyone dropped what they were doing, traveled up. Now, just before they saw Mount Moriah and the temple, what would they do? They'd have to prepare for that incredible sight. They'd have to be mentally and physically ready for the meeting with the house of God. Take a look over here what they found while they were excavating. You guys can see we didn't have to walk too far. The road of the patriarchs is right here. Surely enough, there's an underground discovery here that was cleared up for us. On our tours, we'd like to ask the question, what do you think this is? And you know, speaking of Romans, the Romans loved the good life. They loved the 5-star accommodation, they loved the spa, they loved the sauna. Perhaps this is another one of these spas that the Romans left, like many that were found all over Israel. But this isn't a spa, and the proof of that is this dividing wall over here. This dividing wall over here shows us and teaches us that this is one of many ritual baths or mikvaot that were discovered in the area of Gush Etzion. There is no doubt which religion and what tradition kept a mikveh. A mikveh is very much a Jewish icon, and it leaves a mark here, a fingerprint of Jewish heritage just by discovering it. Now we often ask, what is the purpose of such a subdivider? Some say men and women. One rabbi once said members and non-members, which we thought was incredibly funny. But the truth is, this is really a subdivider between impure who enter and bathe in natural rainwater that is gathered. Even today, you can see natural rainwater that is gathered here in the mikveh and coming out in a state of purity on your way to the temple. Now, that is an incredible feature. Allow me to demonstrate. I'm entering with my robe to keep very much the value of tzniut and humility, not to be exposed. I enter over here, I bathe in the water, and once I'm done, I exit over here as pure. This subdividing wall acts as a buffer, so I do not touch, I do not come into contact with those who are impure. Very, very similar to today with the coronavirus, social distancing, keeping those 2 meters. In the temple period, this was very common between pure people and impure people. Now, why would I continue my traveling in the state of purities? Because just over the mountain range over here, we have that first sight of Vayaret HaMakom Mirachok. You can see the place from afar. At a specific angle, you can really see the Temple Mount and Mount Moriah. And it's an incredible thing. Just the mere sight of the temple was enough for them to stop over here, carve out these ritual baths, and use them on the highway leading to Jerusalem as a station, one of many stations that prepared them to ascend the Temple Mount. This was done 3 times a year, and the entire population would assemble at the house of God during the high holidays. Now, the mountain, which is the 3rd highest mountain in Israel, Neve Daniel, is named after a convoy. That brings us back to the next time period, the time period of the establishment of the state of Israel. Israel is very desperate after the Holocaust to declare its independence, and the British mandate is about to terminate. They basically hand over the problem of Palestine to the United Nations. United Nations take a vote. 33 countries vote in favor of a 2-state solution, a Jewish state and an Arab state. The Jews accept and declare independence on the 14th of May, 1948, and the Arabs reject and declare war. Not only the local population, but also 5 highly trained armies invade Israel. Israel has only 4 neighbors, so the 5th army is Iraq, Syria, Jordan, Egypt, and Lebanon. All invade with a hope to wipe out the young state before it even is established. This is the toughest war we ever had, and Gush Etzion plays an incredible part in that chapter of history. Gush Etzion was given in a form of 4 villages, 4 farms, the impossible mission. They had to defend themselves, and they had to block reinforcements coming in from Hebron and Jordan, trying to link with the Egyptian army that were on their way to Jerusalem. Now that fierce fighting, as was displayed by Elazar the Maccabee and by extreme sacrifice like in Isaac, was very much played out by the members of Kfar Etzion and Gush Etzion in those days. Their sacrifice was honored by David Ben Gurion, who on the 14th of May declared, on the eve of Shabbat, he declared the state of Israel. He said, we owe the fact that we have a Jerusalem to the brave sacrifice of the members of Kfar Etzion and Gush Etzion who fell in battle the day before, the night before, and the 4 villages who were burnt by the Jordanian Legion were the 4 Shabbos candles that were welcoming Israel's independence. This dramatic statement is not underplayed. It really did manifest itself. Neve Daniel is named after that convoy that was able to reach Kfar Etzion, offload that essential supply, the flour, the ammunition, the water, offloaded, but on their way back they get ambushed by the Arab mobs. They have to retreat after some of them are wounded. They have to retreat into a house, and Zerubbabel Horvitz, which has the highest merit of honor, a bravery, the equivalent of the Purple Heart or the Iron Cross in other armies, Itura Oz. There were only 12 of those given out during the toughest war we ever had, and he got one of them. He decides as a commander to take responsibility. He was not hit himself, but he stayed to cover those who were able to run and retreat to that house, and ultimately blew up himself in the armored vehicle that he was in with the wounded as they were overwhelmed and overrun. This kind of supreme sacrifice is something that we all grew up with. It flows in our blood, and it's in the atmosphere and ambiance of such proud heritage and such extreme sacrifice. Today, Gush Etzion is a tremendous accomplishment. We often say if these heroes could have seen what their sacrifice led to, it would really inspire them. And the places mentioned, like Neve Daniel, named after Zerubbabel Horvitz and his convoy, Elazar, the yeshuv right here, named after Elazar the Maccabee, and Alon Shvut. Alon means an oak tree of return. Shvut. 19 years after Gush Etzion fell, we were back here. Same day that we got our Western Wall and our beloved Jerusalem back, we got Gush Etzion, we got Hebron in at the same time period, and we always look at that as linked together.
Tomer, you're telling us and teaching us very nice about the special history of Gush Etzion, 1,000 years ago and also 70 years ago. What's happening now in Gush Etzion? How many people? What we can do here in our next vacation? Should we come to Gush Etzion? Tell us now in the 2020.
Well, 2020 is an incredible year to reflect on all of this with the corona and other issues that seem to affect us. One really finds himself at home looking around, and suddenly, as someone who grew up here in these hills, I suddenly really appreciate the spectrum and the dimensions of Gush Etzion of today. There's building everywhere going on. The prices of real estate are going up as we speak, in spite of everything else that's going on. Gush Etzion has, as I mentioned, over 20 different villages and towns. Over 30,000 people live here. A lot of Anglos who come and make Aliyah, come to live in Israel, want to live in Gush Etzion. It's got a fantastic reputation for being a high quality of life. We're very close to Jerusalem, so we travel and commute to and from Jerusalem on a daily basis. We go down to Tel Aviv from here, and Beersheba. Gush Etzion is very strategically located and has its benefits of both a high quality of life, which in the cities has become expensive. Here in Gush Etzion, for that same price, you can have a beautiful garden, incredible brand new building, and have English speakers and wineries. We have ATVs, we have Jeep rides here, we have the longest zip line in Israel. This place is incredible. It's a unique blend, as the wine is, but a blend of history, a meaningful experience, and just enjoying the beautiful greenery and the modern benefits that we have worked so hard and so much sacrifice has been done for us to be able to today relax and enjoy.
Amazing, amazing, Tomer. Thank you very much for all the information. Could we get a recommendation?
Absolutely, absolutely. I recommend.
First of all, we recommend to take Tomer to be the best tour guide.
Thank you. This is really, as I mentioned in the beginning, my home court advantage. I'm very passionate about sharing my knowledge and also the experience of just being here. With us being at home today with the corona, I'd like to really echo the cold breeze coming out of this mikveh, the greenery that surrounds us, and the fresh air on such a beautiful, hot day. It's really an absolute pleasure to be here. I highly recommend coming here, enjoying the tourism aspect of it, and really coming out not just with fun, but also with a really significant, meaningful experience that we can all take home with us.
You know, people talk about Gush Etzion from overseas, from all over the world. I'm from Australia, you from South Africa, and everyone wants to connect to Gush Etzion. They always ask, which products do we have here? We know that Jacob blessed his son Judea about the winery. Maybe tell us about the wineries we have here, the special blessing.
Okay, we like to see ourselves as serial winners over here. The winery itself has won several gold medals, really in absolute conjunction with Jacob's blessing. The elevation of Gush Etzion allows the best wine to be made here. We have cherry picking for kids. We have beautiful apples here. Incredible achievement, both in an agricultural form and also in industrial form. We have industry that has come out and accelerated the whole idea of Shabbat, the Tzomet, high tech that really integrates with tradition, and that's very unique to this place.
You know, Tomer, we're talking all about Gush Etzion, the history when we had the temple, the history of the independent day of the Israel nation. But there's one special person we didn't hear about him. He was a big king, and he built in Gush Etzion two very special things. I can only guess we're talking about.
Well, King Herod, the Great.
The king.
And the king would be King David, right? So we have two very important relations over here to these kings. Herod the Great was a great builder, not more than that, but he really did leave his mark over here in the form of the Biyar aqueduct. That was a real lifeline to Jerusalem's temple, the Bet HaMikdash. I invite you all to come on a real adventure, Indiana Jones style, where we go down under the ground with torches and flashlights, and we maneuver and make our way through this ancient aqueduct. Every Friday night we say, Aliyad ben Ishai bet Alachmi. We always refer to the son of Ishai, which is King David, who grows up right here in Bethlehem, just next door to Gush Etzion, and he travels through here, slays Goliath right down in the valley of Elah over here, and he ultimately builds a palace fortress, which not too many people know, in Khirbat Abu Qayafa, which is a nice off-road trip to do from here to see one of David's palaces. The famous palace, though, that one can visit here in Gush Etzion East is, of course, the Herodian, named after the architect who built the Wailing Wall. Guys, the Kotel, our beloved Kotel, the Western Wall, was built by King Herod, and he names his palace fortress in Herodian after himself. They also had a National Geographic, and one of the most incredible discoveries there when they found his tomb. I'm not going to spoil it all, but I do encourage you to come here to see this tremendous adventure and the very, very powerful ending of what happened and how did we discovered the tomb of King Herod the Great.
Tomer, thank you very much. For more information about Gush Etzion and what we have to offer and what we can do in tourism sites, you're welcome to go to the internet, write Gush Etzion Tourism and all the information. We'll start again under 5 minutes. Again, Tomer, thank you very much for all the very interesting information, and sounds like a great place.
Thank you, guys. Stay safe, and I hope to see you soon.
שתי, יותר טוב?
כן, הרבה יותר טוב.
היה בלאגן בזה של שילה.
שכולם עשו רעש?
לא, ציירו להם על המסך דברים וזה.
הבעיה, לא, זה מה שבזמון. הבעיה פה, יש כמה חסרות. במזון, אתה נרשם.
לא, אתה יכול לתת לינק ולפרק את חופשי.
כן, לא, בדרך כלל אנשים נרשמים, זה יותר... אתה יותר רואה אנשים שהתחלו.
כן.
שאני פה... כן? זה רעיון. אני דבר לא בצבא, עושים במוניות הלאה. לא זה, אחרי כתובים ביציאה, הוא עושים את זה. זה מתואם עם ארצות הברית, באיזה שעה? עכשיו, זה 15... הם בבתי ספר או שזה הכל מהבית?
מהבית, זה הקטע.
הם עדיין בקיצוניות. תראה, זה פיילוט ראשון, אנחנו נכנסנו לחסות מאוחר, פחות יציאות, אבל זה חשוב לכמה פעמים.
בגדול כל הזה, זה 4 מקומות לכולם פיילוט.
יש עכשיו תשמע, זו הזדמנות מצוינת, כי בעצם, מה זה מלחמה על התודעה. בן אדם שמגיע לארץ, קח אותו לאשקלון או לפה, זה לא משנה. אם כבר ראיתי שם, כבר לא זכו לך.
בתי ספר יהודים גם, אז מראות להם את כל המתאים.
בכלל, התביעה גם באה מהם. כלומר, אם הם יתרשמו, הם יגידו לסוכן שלהם, אני רוצה את גוש ציון. כאילו, הם באים לדרישות.
עכשיו, רציתי להגיד, לא שזה קדם משנה. פעם ראשונה זה הבנים, פעם שנייה אחת זה הבנות, ועכשיו זה משותף.
להתחבר כאילו, אנחנו פה 10 דקות מקום הררי, מלך חקלאות, נושאים מרירים, 1000 מטר מעל גובה הים, ושינו פה. ועכשיו, אחרי שהכרנו והתחברנו למה שאנחנו עכשיו, בוא נצלול, גם אם זה ילדים אמריקאים,
זה המוצר שלנו, כיף חיים. יותר מדי כבד והיסטורי. יותר דרך, פחות מורה.
כן. בסדר? אז תתחיל. אנא, ממש נראה תומר, beautiful places all over the world. We have view, good weather.
איזה good weather?
איך קפוץ לי?
עוד לא התחיל מאי, חום אימים, זה חודשיים אחורה שלג.
תסתכל על הכנרת, אחי. יש הגשמים האחרונים, שבת, מתי זה?
יאללה.
משה, איך השלטים הוכיחו את עצמם? הרגשת את עצמך ללשנה.
בוא נצא קצת. ואז אני אלך איתך. Alright everyone, I'd like to recommend and have Tomer Chazan, the best tour guide, to give us information about Gush Etzion. Where is Gush Etzion? What we have to do in Gush Etzion, and of course, the special history of the place.
So hello everyone and welcome to my home court advantage. This is where I grew up, over here. You may hear my accent. I lived in South Africa, in Johannesburg, during my high school years, but I actually grew up right here in Alon Shvut, which is just over the horizon, and I'd like to welcome you to my home court advantage. I'm always passionate and very grateful for the opportunity to be able to share with you the knowledge and this special place that's very close to my heart, Gush Etzion.
So what's special about Gush Etzion, Tomer? Tell us about.
So Gush Etzion, first of all, means the Etzion block. A block means a group or cluster of villages and towns. Today we have 20 villages and towns that are right here in Gush Etzion next to Jerusalem. Right, on a good day, no traffic, you can get there and back in 20 minutes. And really, we're almost like a satellite neighborhood of Jerusalem. And one click away, you're in the countryside, you're enjoying this incredible landscape and the freedom, the sense of freedom of being in what One of my friends once said, I feel like I'm in the real Israel. Well, Israel's real enough, but Gush Etzion really gives you that atmosphere of being in the real biblical aspect and the real biblical side of Israel. We are 1,000 meters above sea level, which gives us a tremendous breeze. Even on a hot day like today, we have this cooling aspect coming off the Mediterranean Sea. And really an incredible achievement of over 30,000 people living here from a very diverse background, a lot of Anglo communities coming in here, people who make Aliyah from America, from Canada, from South Africa, Australia. They all have a top priority, and they all ask to come live here in Gush Etzion because of its unique blend of both history, proximity, location, and tremendous success story. The success story starts from our inspiration. Our inspiration, when we get up in the morning, we reflect on the history that took place over here. And we're starting off our history with the first Jew in the world. The first Jew in the world was, of course, Abraham. Not many nations can compete with us with a knowledge of who was the first Jew. And Abraham starts over here a very important journey on his way to the binding of Isaac, a turning point in Jewish history. And he walks along here. If you can see behind me, there's a dirt road over here called the Road of the Patriarchs. This is an ancient route that traveled along the mountain, or Derech HaHar, as we'd like to call it, and it linked biblical towns such as Jerusalem, Bethlehem, Hebron, and Beersheba. And at that point, he tells his two boys to sit over here while they're making their way to Jerusalem. As I mentioned, Jerusalem's not far from here. In a few hours of walking, we all do it as kids growing up here in the Gush. We all like to walk to Jerusalem to say that we have, and it's really one of these historical moments. He tells his two boys, Abraham, to sit down over here, and him and the boy move on to deal with the ultimate sacrifice, and that is the sacrifice of Isaac, that later on is echoed and emulated throughout our traditions. The ram's horn that replaces Isaac is, of course, what we use on Rosh Hashanah, the beginning of our Jewish calendar. I'm jumping ahead to another famous holiday that we all love and enjoy. What could be better than Hanukkah, right? Hanukkah, the donuts.
The donuts are from Gush Etzion?
The donuts. I really recommend coming here to English Cake. We definitely have one of the best donuts in the country, especially during that time. My mouth is watering just thinking about it. And really, there's definitely a lot to do here during that December break. That is very much a part of what we're reflecting on over here. Not only is the fun element here for 8 days straight, and every day just gets better, but when we light our Chanukiot over here, we look over to this mountain across of Chilbat Zakaria. That is the name that the local Arabs gave their village. It's actually a Hebrew name called Bet Zechariah. And we know through the book of Maccabees 1 and 2, we know that a famous battle of Elazar took place over here, where the brother of Judah the Maccabee, who we're all familiar with, his name was Elazar. And he comes out here to block the Greek armies that are trying to flank Jerusalem and coming from the south after they failed 2 attempts to come in from the east. Elazar notices a highly decorated elephant. He decides that could be Antiochus Epiphanes III, the king of Greece, and he goes and raids this elephant. You have to understand. Elephant was used as almost the equivalent of a modern tank in today's world. These were Asian elephants brought in from the Greek armies and were given wine. Wine, we'll see soon, is definitely one of the components that we have here in Gush Etzion. But this elephant would be given wine, and his job would be to stampede and rampage through the infantry of the Maccabees. The Maccabees, because of that fact and understanding they were overwhelmed by numbers and by strength, chose this valley over here to ambush the Greek forces that had to fall into single file. Elazar raids this elephant. He's able to get under it, stab it in the belly. Fortunately, the elephant collapsed on him and killed him. He's one of the first of the Maccabee brothers to die in battle. The Yeshuv just over here, the village just over the horizon here, is named Elazar in honor of Elazar the Maccabee. So every Hanukkah we really get really emotional when we light the candles here honoring this battle. There's another proof that this is really a historical highway, should I say, linking Jerusalem to the hills of Judea, and that is very much echoed on this road of the patriarchs that was later on paved by the Romans. The Romans left us with an incredible gift over here, and that is called a Roman milestone. The milestones were GPS landmarks in those days, the equivalent of Waze, what we know today. The Israeli app that sold and did very well as one of our success stories. We like to say that we're serial winners over here in this area, and this Roman milestone is just a reminder of the traveling that was done during the temple period. We know that the 10th Legion of Rome was the one that destroyed the second temple. The Kotel, our beloved Western Wall, is a remnant of the second temple built by Herod the Great, which I'll mention as well here in Gush Etzion. But this road over here was one of those highways. And while we're excavating and follow in the footsteps of Rome, guess what we found over here? Come take a look at this discovery.
Where are you taking us, Tomer?
Like anything in Israel, everything's really close, right? The entire country is the size of New Jersey. So we don't have to go anywhere. We're right over here and take a look.
Wow, what is this?
Okay?
A jacuzzi?
First of all, this could have very well been a jacuzzi. It could have been a Roman spa. The Romans loved the good life. They loved the 5-star accommodation. They loved the bathhouse. They loved the sauna. But over here, in this particular case, what you would expect to be part of Roman culture, we actually found nothing less than a ritual bath, a mikveh. A mikveh is one of those classic Jewish icons left behind from a long time ago. Now, why would a mikveh be found in the middle of nowhere in a field? Remember, in those days it wasn't the middle of nowhere, it's really on a highway. The highway that stretched and connected all the way to Jerusalem. So what we see over here are two entrances. We like to ask on tour, what do you think these entrances are for? Many say men and women, some say members and non-members, but ultimately this really takes us into a very important factor that maybe with the corona we can understand better. In those days, if you were in a state of impurity, if you touched a dead animal, a dead person, or you were called tameh, you were actually in a state of impurity. And this subdividing wall was designed to prevent those who were going in on this end in a state of impurity, right? They were going down into this mikveh. They would submerge 7 times and come out on this side over here. In a state of purity, I am prevented from touching anyone over here. And now I'm in a state of purity. By the way, it's very exciting to see there is natural water still here from the recent rainwater. That means that this mikveh, this ritual bath that has been excavated, is actually functional after thousands of years. One can actually still use it. And this is incredible because this wasn't the only mikveh found in this area. There were several. The reason is very simple. In those days, even if you were living outside here in the farmland, in the hills of Judea, you would have to drop everything and take your first paycheck, right, your first produce, your first food, and go to the temple in Jerusalem. And you would take your entire family along the highway over here, the road of the patriarchs, stop at this strategic point, bathe and submerge in the mikveh in preparation of what? Seeing on the next mountain over here, seeing the temple. The first time you can actually witness the temple coming in from the south. And just the mere fact that you're about to see the house of God was good enough to have to prepare and have to submerge in the mikveh. So that when you see it, you're seeing it for the first time in a state of purity. That is the role of this mikveh. It's also an iconic reminder that the history of Gush Etzion does not start in the modern era, but goes back to Jewish presence all the way back to the temple time period. Now the word Jew, I don't know if I tell you, means Judean or Judea. You come from Judea. So even the name itself was preserved here over thousands of years. That is a really good branding and good marketing for something that was geographically so important. A Jew would come from Judea to the Temple Mount, bathe in a Jewish mikveh on his way to fulfill his obligation 3 times a year. Now, the modern history of Gush Etzion is very symbolic, because that very same mountain where you can see the Temple Mount from is really an iconic battle that takes place here in 1948. The toughest war we ever had took place over here as well, the War of Independence, 1948, following the United Nations vote of 33 countries in favor of a Jewish state and an Arab state. The Jews accept and declare independence on the 14th of May, 1948. The Arabs reject and declare war. And Gush Etzion in those days is 4 villages or 4 farms: Kfar Etzion, Revadim, Masot Yitzchak, and En Tzurim. These are the 4 farms that are given the impossible task, not only to defend themselves, but also to block the reinforcements that are going to come in from Egypt, from Hebron, and from Jordan on their way to Jerusalem. And the battle for Jerusalem continues right here in these hills in 1948. A very famous convoy called Nebi Daniel is a convoy that offloads the vital food, ammunition, and products in Kfar Etzion, and on its way back it's ambushed by the Arab irregular troops. They are forced under fire, once they've taken some casualties, to retreat into a house not far from the road over here, and their leader, Zerubbabel Horvitz, does a supreme sacrifice and move. He covers those who are able to retreat. He covers them and then wires his armored vehicle with explosive. As they get overrun and overwhelmed by the Arab troops, he blows up himself and his armored vehicle. And he gets one of 12 medals of honor that were given out during that tough war. In that war, we lost over 6,000. So that heritage of supreme sacrifice from Elazar all the way through to Zerubbabel Horvitz in the modern times is something that is the foundation. It's the essence of the motivation here that the people here in Gush Etzion have to both serve their country, serve their people, but also establish an incredible success story in honor of sacrifice that has already been laid down and done, so that we can just relax, enjoy, and come to Gush Etzion. Gush Etzion also takes us back to the blessing of Jacob, who's given us incredible insight, almost like a prophecy of what's about to happen here in the hills of Judah.
David Ben Gurion, the first Prime Minister of Israel, what did he teach us about Gush Etzion?
Well, in his dramatic speech, and David Ben Gurion slept 4 hours a night. I said his reality and his dream merged, because he was the one who actually put the hammer down on a Friday afternoon on the eve of Shabbat, and he declared the state of Israel. During this dramatic moment, he turns around and says, if there's any reason we have a Jerusalem today, it's in honor of those who fell one night before then. On the 13th of May, Gush Etzion fell to the Jordanian Legion, and 4 villages were burning like 4 Shabbos candles in honor as a sacrifice for Israel's independence. It's thanks to Gush Etzion's sacrifice that Jerusalem was not overrun by the Jordanian Legion, and we had Jerusalem to thank for. And he recognizes that straight away in his most dramatic moment, in the most dramatic speech.
And from then, Gush Etzion took this story and wanted to show it and let everyone know about the special and important job that all the warriors here that died, 240 warriors that died in just the day before the Independence Day. And we want to teach and show everyone and know how much important this story is for the nation, for all over the world.
Well, I wish you guys were here with me on such a beautiful day. You feel the cold air coming out of the mikveh, the sun is shining, the green fields. It's just incredible. And in contrast to the turbulent history that I mentioned, we can literally see, if we go over the mountain here, you can see down to the Mediterranean Sea, And one click in Gush Etzion, you go that way, in you, I say, of Israel, length more in terms of the biblical association. You can see this is really Bible country. It's almost like a land game called real 30 minutes with everything all the action that takes place in Jerusalem. They all come out here to get the fresh air of the countryside. We have a winery that, as I like to say, we're serial winners. It's one tremendous success story in the wine, competing all over the world with Germany and with France and everything else. Gush Etzion has won gold medals, and I really encourage everyone to come here, ATV through the vineyards, and then go and really enjoy a restaurant. It's not just the wine, but it's also the restaurant and the comforts that have been established here in the Gush over the last years.
Tomer, before we finish, I think it's important that we know that Herodus built the Western Wall, and we also have two brilliant, amazing projects that he built here in Gush Etzion. Tell us about it.
Right, well, Herod the Great, he was known as great, mainly a great builder. He leaves his iconic achievements here in Gush Etzion for us. The first is the most important natural resource, and that is water. And Jerusalem, as its population grew and the temple expanded, needed water. And we found here, right here in Gush Etzion, the BR tunnel. This tunnel, it's incredible, guys. You can come here with the covert distancing, the social distancing, and hike through a real Indiana Jones story here, an adventure going under the ground. I'm sure some of you have done the Hezekiah tunnel in Jerusalem. This is the next level. You go down, and like a video game, you make your way under the ground and pop up in the middle of a vineyard that was part of the aqueduct, the lifeline of Jerusalem during the time of the temple. Herod, who built the Western Wall, as you mentioned, also leaves his palace fortress in East Gush Etzion, the Herodian, named after himself. And in a very dramatic discovery in 2007, led National Geographic, the entire world, to come to Gush Etzion to focus on that. It was on the level of the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls. I won't spoil it. You guys will have to come out and see what was discovered here in Herodian. But I'll just give you a hint. It's the tomb of Herod himself, who asked, he could have been buried anywhere in the world. He asked to be buried right here in the Herodian, and there was a very good reason for that. Herod leaves his legacy here. We have King David, who grows up here in Bethlehem and travels to meet his brothers, slays Goliath just down the road from here. All this history is a tremendous blend, like a good wine. We have cherry picking over here. We have apples. We have the longest zip line in Israel. We like, if we're going to do something, we do it all the way. It's the longest zip line in Israel. Deer land, we have bread making, pat bemelach. We have really all aspects of the blessing of Jacob right here. The wine, the olive trees, the bread, every element that you could think of. Greg's Cafe, Burger's Bar, everything that you need is right here in the Gush.
So, Tomer, we was talking that Gush Etzion is like 10 minutes from Jerusalem and 10 minutes from Hebron. We know we're standing on the Patriot Road where our fathers used to go towards the temple. And we know also Rachel Imeinu, when she was on the way, she passed away just in the sides of Gush Etzion. Tell us about it.
Truly loved Rachel. Why was she not buried in Hebron? As you mentioned, Hebron is about 40 minutes from here. It has a great community there as well. And we like to, when we tour Gush Etzion, we extend, sometimes we go visit both the tomb of Rachel and the tomb of the patriarchs right here, going back to the beginning. Rachel passes away over here in almost a prophetic prophecy that is laid down. And she dies on the way, al derech Ephrata. And the way of Ephrata, the largest town here in the Gush is Efrat, and named after that road. But we have an incredible story that she does not make it to Hebron, where the rest of the patriarchs and matriarchs are buried. And the reason is that she saw in the future that her children are going to be taken captive. She dies giving birth to Benjamin, right, her second son. And while she's giving birth, she passes away, there's a very incredible connection to the fact that she was buried on the side of the road, knowing that in the future her children, after the destruction of the temple, would leave. The place I grew up is called Alon Shavut, the oak tree of return, and the slogan here in the Gush is V'shavu banim likvulam, and the children return to their borders. Just as we left, we ultimately return. Just as Kfar Etzion was overrun by the Jordanian Legion in 1948, 19 years later, the same time that we got Herod's Western Wall, the Herodian, Hebron, and Gush Etzion were all part of Israel, were all achieved when the Jordanians withdrew in 1967, the Six-Day War. It all came back to us, and we're here to stay. There's a tremendous population of over 30,000 people living in the Gush and enjoying these stories on a daily basis, literally getting out of bed every morning, feeling this is another day of a meaningful reality in the long history of Jewish people.
Well, Tomer, you teach us a lot about Gush Etzion, the history of the place. What's so special and unique living here, visiting here? And we want to thank you very much. You're a great tour guide and you gave the information very well. Guys, if you want to learn more about Gush Etzion, you're welcome to go to the website Gush Etzion Tourism and especially come and have you the great vacation. Just 15 minutes from Jerusalem, and we have the best tour guide, as you can see. We're wishing you all the best. Thank you very much, Tomer.
Thank you, guys. I look forward to seeing you. Stay safe and healthy. להתראות.